All right, I'm here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us on a Monday. My name is Josh. This is the JMULL show. We got a lot to get to today. It was a weird weekend in football. My biggest takeaway from the weekend, personally, is that I'm pretty good at betting on college football, and I am just horrible at betting on the NFL. Horrible. Shouts to Drew Brees for carrying me to 3.5 touchdowns combined with Tom Brady, because the Buccaneers might as well have not even shown up last night. Maybe one of these days we'll get one of those games that's actually good, but that's clearly up in the air because that was just bad. Horrible. What's the book? A no good, horrible, very bad day. Well, it was a no good, horrible, very bad day for the Bucs. 194 yards total offense. They just didn't have the ball ever. The Saints had possession for 40 minutes and 4 seconds of this game. Bucs they have the best DVOA in football. But they just have these games where they disappear. And maybe it's just the Saints, and as long as they are able to avoid the Saints, then they're fine. But they just have these games where Tom Brady just doesn't have it, and the offense isn't moving, and 0 rushing first downs. 0. They had a total of 8 yards rushing. 8. You're not going to win anything substantial if you're only rushing for 8 yards. But if here's the other thing that's just weird. They didn't run it. Like it's not like they tried and they couldn't make it happen. They didn't run it. Ronald Jones II, 3 carries. Leonard Fournette, 1 carry. Blaine Gabbert, my boy, 1 carry. They didn't even try. And it's really hard to be a productive football team if the rush is just non-existent. It's just really hard. And what it resulted in is a 38-3 just absolute blowout. Also, is Taysom Hill the most versatile player in the NFL? I think he's got to be, right? He's just all over the place. Threw a couple passes for 48 yards. He rushed 7 times for 54. He also caught a pass for 21 yards. And it was like a real route, too. It wasn't like a broken play kind of thing. It was a real route. It was sort of a slant route across the middle, and he had to go up and get it and bring it down, and then took a hit. Not a big one, but took a hit. It wasn't a trick play where the quarterback is just sort of just run out to the right and get this little lob feathery pass that is never actually a real pass on a regular play. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's all over the place, but that game was just a really boring, horrible Sunday night football game that on the schedule jumps off the page really quickly. And that leads me to what I want to talk about. To start the show here, we'll get to more Week 9 stuff here in a few minutes, some college football stuff, Notre Dame, Clemson. It's Masters Week, so we're going to get to that in a few minutes as well. But what I want to start with here is just I just don't know who's going to win the NFC. I'm really struggling with who's going to win the NFC. At the top, you have a bunch of 6-2. You got 3 6-2 teams with the Saints, the Seahawks, the Packers. Then you got the Bucs. But then after that is the Cardinals, Rams, Bears, 49ers. Okay, those are the next 4 teams. And unless you're a Cardinals, Rams, Bears, or 49ers fan, and one who is, to be honest with you, delusional, nobody's picking those teams to be the favorites to win the NFC right now. So you've got these 4 teams at the top that, first of all, they all have great quarterback play. That's what's winning the NFC right now, right? And then the Cardinals have, Kyler Murray's been good. But you got Brady, Rodgers, Wilson, and Breeze at the top of the NFC. But the Seahawks go and an uninspiring defense. 27 first downs for the Bills, 420 total yards, 386 yards passing. Their rushing isn't really there, but Josh Allen was really good. And this is a Seattle team that's now given up 25 points, 30 points, 31 points, 23 points, 26 points, 37 points, 27 points, and 44 points. Not a good defense, and it's a fundamental difference between this team and those Seahawks teams, several years ago that were really competing for Super Bowls. And I think this team is still in the boat of competing for Super Bowls, but 34 points. Russell Wilson, 28 of 41, 390 yards. They didn't have a great run game yesterday, but it used to be that if the Seahawks scored 34 points, they were going to win by 20. At least a couple touchdowns. And that's just not the case this year. So the point being, and it's the same issue that I have with the Titans. The Titans have a great offense. Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill continues to impress me, even though I refuse to really have faith in him. But then you've got Derrick Henry. But their defense is just not good. And the Seahawks defense is just not good. And when I'm really looking at teams to win Super Bowls, where I'm looking first is the defense. That's why I don't think the Titans are really going to compete for a Super Bowl. But that Seattle defense is not anywhere near the top of the NFL. And it's putting Russell Wilson in a position where he needs to score 34 points just to lose by 10. Of course, that doesn't happen every week quite like that, but the point is still the same. And then you have the Bucs, who sometimes look really good. They beat the Packers 38-10. They go and beat the Raiders 45-20. But then they have these games where they really struggle against the Giants. And you should never beat the Giants by only 2 if you're the Bucs. You have really good defenses like the Bears defense, where you lose 20-19. And there are just days where Tom Brady just doesn't have it. 38-3, and we talked about it. That right now, that run game is just horrible. They had 9 yards? Is that what I said? 8 yards in that game. Fournette had a good game against the Giants, but not a phenomenal game. 15 carries for 52 yards isn't exactly jumping off the page. It's just over 3 yards per carry. 81 yards rushing. There are just major holes in that offense, especially when it comes to the run game. Against the Bears, Ronald Jones the second, 106 yards, but you gotta have more than 9 rushing yards. So sometimes you just don't know what you're gonna get from that Tampa Bay offense, and we saw that to the highest effect against the Saints. And then you've got this Saints team who is good, but this is a Saints team that's lost to the Raiders, and this is a Saints team that sometimes you're not sure just how effective Tom Brady is at this point. not Tom Brady, sorry, Drew Brees. There are times where he just doesn't look like he can throw the ball farther than 10 yards anymore. And they're also the team that has beat the Chargers, Bears, Panthers, and Lions by a total of 15 points. Total. They beat the Lions by 6, the Chargers by 3, the Panthers by 3, the Bears by 3. So, if a couple things go differently, we're talking about a team that is, 4-4 instead of 6-2. The Packers played well, but the Packers also played a 49ers team that had like $80 million worth of salary on their injured list. Like 80 million, something stupid like that. Nick Mullins was the quarterback for San Francisco. You just can't take, you got to take all of that with a grain of salt. Now, Rodgers, 25 of 31, 305 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. The run game, there's a lot of guys that carry the football for them. Devontae Adams is the best receiver in football right now. 10 catches, 173 yards, a touchdown. Shouts to him scoring the first touchdown of the game. But all of these teams, and this is a Green Bay team that lost to the Bucs 38-10, and then went and lost to the Vikings. The Vikings who are just 2-5 now. In that game, they just sort of let Dalvin Cook run all over them. There are, of course, those questions on the defensive side of the football and the offensive side of the football when it comes to playmakers. And instead, in the first round, they draft a quarterback in Bryce Love, who is not like, it's not a quarterback that, while he was good in college, it's not one of those guys that jumps off the page and is like, oh my God, how did he drop to us? We have to take him. Yes, Rodgers is about to turn 37. But he's still got a couple years. It's not like he's falling off a cliff, right? I mean, this is a guy who's 2,253 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and the best QBR in football right now at 87.5. So it's not so there are, of course, questions there as well. So the question is, who's the favorite to win the NFC right now? And we went and looked at the standings. I mean, you've got these 4 teams at the top. It has to be one of these 4 teams, whether it's the Saints, Seahawks, Packers, Bucks. But there are a couple questions here. Who's the best team in this conference? Who can put together 3 games in a row, 2 games in a row, whatever it is, to get to the Super Bowl? And whose holes, and if you're looking, it's probably the Saints, at least right at this moment. Maybe the Packers. But which team do you have the most confidence in? Because I'm not sure. I mean, I was ready to put my stamp of approval on the Bucks when they beat the Saints. And then they just might as well have not even showed up. 38-3. And they had this stretch where these 2 weeks in a row, after losing to the Bears, they looked great against Green Bay. They looked great against the Raiders. Then they stumble to a win on Monday night against the Giants, and then just get absolutely blown out of the water. And that's not, even if teams have off weeks that are going to win Super Bowls, they don't lose 38-3 on their off weeks. That's for sure. They got the Panthers, Rams, Chiefs, Vikings, Falcons, Lions. Falcons coming up. They get to play the Falcons a couple of times. That's nice. They get to play the Panthers again. But I just don't know. Because everybody has these holes and everybody's inconsistent, and it might just come down to, an NCAA tournament type feel where who's the hottest at the right time. because all of these teams have had moments where they look great, but then they lose to a bad football team, or they get smoked by a good one, or there's just glaring holes in their defense. I mean, not only did the Seahawks lose, but they've also, I mean, are they kind of missing that it factor? Like, Seahawks teams from the past would not have blown a lead to Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. And they basically aided and abetted that comeback. Lots of questions. Lots of questions that need to be answered. And lots of questions that leave me sort of scratching my head when it comes to, once we get to the playoffs, who is that team that looks the strongest? Who's that team that has put together a nice, last 4 weeks of the season and looks the strongest heading into the playoffs? We'll see. We'll keep an eye on it, of course, but there's just, the football season I thought was starting to make some sense, and then and that's not to say that real quick, that's not to say that the Bills in the Seahawks case are not a good football team. They are. They're 7-2, and they've only lost to the Titans and to the Chiefs. You can't blame them for either of those losses. Those are both good football teams, but to see a Seahawks team give up 44 points is just, like, it still catches me by surprise. Still. Coming next, we'll talk about a couple more NFL things, bounce over to the AFC for a few minutes. Clemson lost to Notre Dame, and we'll also talk about some other college football things. But we'll do all of that here in a few moments. You're watching The JMULL Show, 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Monday, twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us on a Monday. You know, we talked about how it's been a weird week for the NFC. It's also been a weird week for the AFC. I mean, you had the Steelers stumble to a win against the Cowboys. Stumble. You know, they were down 19-9 at one point. You need 15 points in the fourth quarter just to come back and win. Big Ben, you know, a little banged up, but at the end of the day, you're 8-0. You escape with a win, and you get it done. You know, this is another team that really needs to work on their run game. That defense is good. That defense is going to be fine. But James Conner, 9 rushes for 22 yards, was far and away the best, the biggest part of the run offense yesterday. I mean, Big Ben was second with 1 carry for 8 yards. He had the longest run of the day. And maybe that's what we need to talk. I mean, maybe we look at the team with the best running game in each conference. The best good team with the best running game. I mean, I don't know how I feel about Lamar, but I mean the Ravens running attack is awesome. They played well at Indianapolis over the weekend. But the Steelers escape. That's the right word for sure. They escape with a 24-19 win. Needed 15 points in the last quarter to get the job done. The Chiefs, I mean, Mahomes was awesome. 30 of 45, 372 yards, 4 touchdowns. But again, this is a team who desperately needs a better running game. 12 rushes for 30 yards, no touchdowns. Teddy Bridgewater was solid, 36 of 49, 310 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. And then they had, Christian McCaffrey comes back, 18 rushes, 69 yards, nice, 1 touchdown. And, 104 yards and a pair of touchdowns. Bridgewater gets 2 carries for 19 yards and a touchdown as well. And McCaffrey also 10 receptions for 82 yards. He's just so good. So good. But the Chiefs, man, I mean, 33-31. And that's not nearly as, and the Panthers are a solid football team, but that's not nearly as convincing as you want your team to win by at home. They were trailing at halftime, and there were a lot of points scored in the fourth quarter. 27 points scored in the fourth quarter alone, which is really, really quite impressive. That's a lot of points. The Bills, I think they're cementing themselves as a good football, and they've had these weird games though. They've had a couple of close calls. You get smoked by the Titans. You get handled by the Chiefs. Then you stumble to a win at the Jets. You stumble to a win at home against the Patriots. But then you welcome the Seahawks to your building, and you win 44-34. Josh Allen 31 of 38 for 415 yards 415 yards passing. You get a pair of touchdowns from the running game. They've got so many weapons on that team. Stephon Diggs, 9 receptions, 118 yards. 3 different guys catching touchdown passes from Josh Allen in this game. And we already talked about the Seahawks. But that's just a weird team too. And maybe it's partly because I'm just not sold on the idea of the Bills being a good football team. At least it's just a little weird. So maybe that's part of my roadblock when it comes to talking about if they're a serious contender to win the AFC. But then you look at the other teams in this conference. You've got the Steelers, you've got the Ravens, you've got the Chiefs, of course. You got these good football teams ahead of them with no respect to Josh Allen, but better quarterbacks. And that's obviously a big part of it too. But they're sitting in third in the AFC. The Steelers and Chiefs, of course, just sort of running the table. The Steelers 8-0, the Chiefs 8-1. The Chiefs' lone loss coming to the Raiders, right, in Week 5. I still feel pretty confident about the Steelers and the Chiefs atop of that conference. But the Bills are right there, and I think you got to give the Bills some respect there. Their defense certainly needs to see some improvement. I mean, that's I think a fair assessment of the Bills right now. But ultimately, the point is still the same, that they are really pushing right there. They're right there knocking on the door, and they proved that they really belong against a Seahawks team that has been, either considered one of or the best NFC team, at certain points during the season so far. One of the best NFC teams, and they go to Buffalo, and Buffalo hits them in the mouth early, and while the Seahawks had some more success coming down the stretch, I mean, like you said, they scored 24 points in the second second half alone, but the Bills, 3 quarters with more than 10 points or more, 17 in the fourth quarter alone. That's a real football team, and that's a football team that demands respect, I think, for sure. So it was a weird week in the NFL, I thought, and it's not just a weird week because I had a really horrible time betting on them. But let's talk about the college football side of things for a few minutes. First of all, we need to talk about this parlay that hit on Saturday. Nothing crazy lucrative, but the way that it happened was pretty ridiculous. Let me find it real here. So first, I mean, North Carolina handles Duke, Louisiana Lafayette handles Arkansas State, TCU and Fresno State handle UNLV and Texas Tech, and then Oregon handling Stanford as well. But USC, and I thought it was going to end really early in the day. I thought it was like, oh, okay, here we go. It's not gonna be my day. They're down 27-13, 27-14. USC is, and score twice in the final 3 minutes. They score, and then get the onside kick, and on a 4th and 12 or a 4th and 9 or something. A great pass and a touchdown, and then are able to get the stop. Against Arizona State, with just a minute or so remaining in the game. So that's how the day started, along with, the over. Bet the over on Memphis in South Florida at 66.5, and the Tigers were down 33-20 with 4 minutes left in the game. And so, the most logical way for them the only way the over hits is that the Tigers come back and win the football game 34-33. That's exactly what happened. So it was a good Saturday followed by a not so good Sunday, but a couple things here. Indiana is for real. Michael Penix Jr., 30 of 50, 342 yards, 3 touchdowns. Stevie Scott III, 24 carries for 97 yards, a pair of touchdowns. You got a lot of guys catching the football. Phil Yor, 11 receptions. Ty Freifogel, 7 receptions, 142 yards, and a touchdown. This is a real football team, man. And it's weird to think about that. IU, the most exciting thing in IU athletics right now is their football team, not their basketball team, which maybe could change. But 9 of 18 on 3rd down, 2 of 2 on 4th down, 460 total yards. That got a nice, a balanced attack, not making mistakes, dominating possession time, and they came out and hit them early. They were up 24-7 at halftime, and then just sort of cruised to a win after that. IU's for real, man. Penn State stumbles again, and I don't know what's wrong with them. But IU getting the job done, and they need some respect as a real Big Ten football team. They play Michigan State next weekend. but then they go at Ohio State. Now, I'm not expecting Indiana to beat Ohio State, but that's going to be a really important football game. And a really good one, because Indiana now 10th in the country. It's probably going to be a top 10 matchup, assuming that Indiana can get the job done at Michigan State, who is just not a great football team this season. 1-2, their lone win coming. They've lost 38-27 against Rutgers, and then got smoked 49-7 by the Iowa Hawkeyes. Let's talk about Notre Dame Clemson for a few minutes here. 47-40 final. And listen, the biggest issue with Clemson right now is that they're just not healthy on the defensive side of the football. Notre Dame 10 of 19 on third down conversions, 518 total yards, 208 yards on the ground. Kyron Williams leading that charge, but Ian Book being a really big part of that as well. He also had, Kyron Williams, 23 carries, 140 yards, 3 touchdowns. There's just not enough push at the front of that Clemson, in that Clemson front seven right now. There's just not. There were some mistakes made. They turned the football over 3 times. The Tigers do, and after all of that, they still had a chance to win this football game. DJ Uiagalelei, 29 of 44, 439 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's not the issue. He hasn't been the issue since he's been under center. And this is and you could have made the argument after the Boston College game, and I was impressed by DJ after the Boston College game, but you could have made the argument that Trevor Lawrence would have made that game, even if the Clemson defense wasn't playing well, which they did in the first half of the last game. They did in the first half of this game either. They played better in the third quarter, but then gave up 24 points in the fourth quarter in overtime. But you could have made that argument for Trevor Lawrence after the Boston College game, that even if they're struggling like that, Trevor Lawrence is still going to go and put a 54 spot up on Boston College, and it wouldn't matter. You can't say that in this one. You can't look at this game and say that, Trevor Lawrence would have been so much better than 29-44, 439 yards, 2 touchdowns, and leading the team to 40 points. Because listen, and DJ also had a rushing touchdown, but Etienne was not nearly as good as he was in the first game against Boston College. He had 8 receptions. He's certainly a weapon out of the backfield, but only 18 carries, 28 yards. The Notre Dame defense is really solid against the run. The biggest weapons here in this game were Cornell Powell and Amari Rodgers. That translates to the most important player on this football team in this game was DJ Uiagalelei. And through 2 games, he hasn't really made a big mistake. No interceptions in either. He showed off some incredible arm strength. He showed off the ability to make really nice passes in important situations. And first of all, I'm not dogging Travis Etienne. He was Travis Etienne. He had an impact. But in that first game, it was clear that Etienne was just so good, and it was outclassing the entire Boston College team. And it just wasn't readily obvious this time around like it was in that first one. But Uiagalelei, 439 yards, 2 touchdowns. I was once again impressed by him, and the reason that he needs to he'll need to work on getting off to faster starts. I mean, only 13 points in the first half for the Tigers again in this one, but 27 points in the second half in overtime. And he gets the job done when he needs to, and that's the thing I've been most impressed with, is that when the lights come on and they're down by 10 at halftime, he leads the charge to score 10 straight points early in the third quarter and tie it back up quickly and continue to score points when they need to. So it would be nice to be able to play with a lead some, which they haven't been able to do in either game really. But with that being said, I mean, with a minute 30 left, the Tigers were up by 7. Despite everything I've said, they're up 33-26. And Ian Book, to his credit, leads Notre Dame down, and then the Tigers score first in overtime. Clemson matches. Notre Dame matches, and then Notre Dame scores again, and Clemson just can't get it done. Sometimes that's how it works. But the thing that needs to improve is that Clemson defense, and part of it's because they're banged up, and not part of it. A lot of it is because they're banged up, and I acknowledge that 100%. But that's been the thing that has turned Clemson into a one-loss team, first of all, and that's the thing that has made it, that resulted in them losing, only beating Boston College by, 6 points, 34-28. Yeah. The other thing is that there's been some heat, Notre Dame storming the field. I mean, everyone has seen the pictures at this point. I'm not sure I'm ready to blame college football for that, because there were a lot of people in that stadium, but I've also been in a student section that stormed a court, go Dogs, beating Villanova, when I was a freshman at Butler, when they were the number 1 team in the country. And as the game was winding down and it was clear that there was a chance they were going to win, I mean, security started being put into place, and there was just nothing they could do. I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but it's a bad look when you've got 20,000 people standing on the stage. Maybe 20,000 is a stretch, but a lot of people crowding around the football team in the middle of a pandemic, right in the center of the field. That's all I'll say. I'm not quite ready to blame anybody for it, but it certainly was a bad look. Coming up next, it is Masters Week, baby. We're going to talk about it. Coming up next, JMULL Show, wantedsportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Monday. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. What's up, baby? It is Masters Week. It is November 9th. And it is Masters Week. How awesome is that? And not only is it Masters Week now, in 6 months, we're going to have another one. Instead of having to wait 12. It's awesome. It is a lovely time. And obviously the price that needed to be paid for there to be a November Masters and then an April Masters right after it is, of course, not worth it, of course. But it is a fun byproduct. So we're gonna do picks, my predictions on Wednesday, right before the tournament starts. We'll have another show on Wednesday, of course, Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live, and we'll do that then. But I wanted to start off Masters Week today. I didn't want to wait until Wednesday to not mention it at all. So I got a couple things I'm looking for, and I'm looking at, and I'm interested in, and I'm keeping tabs on, however you want to describe it. I got a lot of things that I'm just making sure I'm keeping tabs on. The first thing is how is Augusta going to present itself? And when I say that, I mean from a couple different perspectives. First, Augusta is the greenest place on earth. The grass just is a different color of green. You just can't find that anywhere else. And in April, you have the flowers. The trees are really green, so on and so forth. But it's November. And from what I've seen on social media from the Masters accounts, it looks like they're going to lean into the fall thing. But how are they going to present the course? How is it going to play? Is it going to play any differently? You know, when they moved the Players' Championship back to March, they talk about how the wind directions change and how it's just a different golf course and it's a little cooler and how these things impact the course. And maybe the weather won't be all that different because it's Georgia in November, and Georgia in November is pretty similar. At least there's not a major striking blow you away difference between Georgia in November and Georgia in April. But how do the wind patterns change? Is there just something a little different about every hole? Are they really leaning into this fall Masters kind of thing? Because it would be cool to have them do something so that every time you see a clip from this year's Masters, whether it's the greatest shots in Masters history or whether it's, highlights from all of Tiger Woods' Masters victories, for what it's worth, Tiger Woods is not going to win this Masters. I seem very confident in that, considering that he's a guy who's won there a lot of times, and I understand that. But I think it would be cool to know the second that you see it, the highlight, whenever and wherever it might be, that, oh yeah, that's from the 2020 Fall Masters. That was cool. There's some things that will make it obvious, like there will be no fans. And especially for the places where you just see these massive galleries of people, you're talking, right around the tee box on 16, the massive area sort of in between the 12 green, the 11 green, the 12 tee, and everyone sitting off to the right of the 12 tee, sort of in between 11 green and 12 tee, and then you've got all the people that sit to the right of the fairway at 13. Augusta's a weird golf course, just not from a layout in every hole necessarily, but just the way you sort of move around the golf course from hole to hole. I mean, there's not, a path through some trees to get to the next tee box sort of thing. It's just there are these parts of the golf course where it's just a wide open space. Like walking from 11 green to 12 tee, like to the right of the 13 fairway. There are just some interesting parts of this golf course, and they just are going to look completely empty because there are these massive open spots with no fans. And so I'm curious to see what they do with those. How different does it? How do the Masters feel? And unlike most, the Masters have a feeling that just not many sporting events in the world, period, have. We're going to find out how much of that is just the aroma and the aura of Augusta, and how much of that is the aura of Augusta with a lot of fans and the patrons, and you know what I mean? It's going to be awesome either way. I'm just curious how it's going to play out. Beefy Bryson versus Augusta, of course. Can he break it? I saw a tweet the other day talking about how he had 65 yards to the green at one, and if you're familiar with the course at all, I mean, guys are hitting 3-wood a lot off of the first tee at Augusta, and you're hitting 3-wood, and then you have 160 yards in, 65 yards, taking it over the trees. He had a 9-iron or something into 13. What else did they say? He reached the upslope on 9. If you're familiar with 9, it sort of bends around the corner. You go up the hill. Apparently he was on the upslope at 9. Is Bryson going to break Augusta in the way that Tiger did? In the way that what Tiger did in 97, does it completely change the way that Augusta approaches the golf course? That Augusta National and the people in charge there, do they change the golf course based on what Bryson is about to do? I don't think the answer is yes, because I don't see Bryson winning by as many strokes as Tiger did or dominating the way that Tiger did. It's not like Bryson has had a ton of success there. With that being said, he also was a normal-looking human being the last time he was there, almost 2 years ago in the spring of 2019. So I concede that. I promise. I do. But we're still talking about, in the Masters, he's only played in it twice. 3 times. His best finish, he hasn't finished inside the top 20, and his best finish is a T21 when he was the low am in 2016. He was T38 in 2018 and T29 in 2019. Now, at the U.S. Open, he's also gone cut, T15, cut, T25, T35, and then first. And at the PGA, he was T33, cut, T4. The point being is that clearly Beefy Bryson is a little bit more effective at majors than previous Bryson was. But so I'm looking at Beefy Bryson, looking at that really, really hard. And, some of these other things, Jordan Spieth is just not in a good place right now, but he's got a 70.14 average at Augusta, and it just feels like one of those places where it doesn't matter how he's playing, that he has a chance to win. And then there are a lot of first-time participants who are big-time players. Colin Morikawa, first Masters. He's a major champion and the 4th-ranked player in the world. Matthew Wolff, we've seen what he can do. He's coming off a runner-up at the U.S. Open. Scotty Scheffler, Cameron Champ. You've got a lot of talent. And will the pressure feel different when you don't have a ton of fans around you and you can't hear the roars from 16 and the roars from 12 and the roars from 13? Because that's one of the cool parts about this golf course, is that you can hear the roars from everywhere. So how does that do we get a champion that maybe we're not expecting because that champion, because the pressure's just a little different. I mean, we talked about this a little bit with the NBA. Is it's a little bit easier to step up when there aren't 20,000 screaming fans in the stadium, in the arena, when it's Game 6 of the finals, when it's Game 5 of the finals, or whatever, or when you have to win Game 7 of a conference finals. It's just different, and Augusta will be different. It'll be awesome, but it will be different. We'll do picks on Wednesday. So we will get to that part of it, but I just wanted to open up Masters Week with some chats about some of the headlines I am looking at. Coming next, we'll do some FYI. Get out of here real quick. JMULL Show. That's what you're watching. 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Friday or Monday. Man, working to the weekend, right? Is that the cliche thing to say? FYI, for your information first, a non-sports related for your information. It's trending on Twitter right now. Pfizer and BioNTech announced trial data showing COVID-19 vaccine is more than 90% effective. The new data indicates that the company is on track to file an emergency use application with U.S. regulators. That's no matter how you put it, that's awesome. Pfizer says an early peek at its vaccine data suggests the shots may be 90+% effective at preventing COVID-19. The interim analysis looked at 94 infections recorded so far in a study that enrolled nearly 44,000 people. That's awesome. That is, there's no way to spin it that's not awesome. Steps in the right direction, that we're moving closer to a vaccine. Now, of course, I'm not I haven't read enough to tell you what that means in terms of how far away we are from a vaccine or anything about that. I haven't done enough reading about it yet, but that is cool that not only do they have a vaccine that they've developed, but they've got one that works, and that's awesome. The Philadelphia Union, shouts to my boy Josh Doring, the host of Touchline Talk. He's a big Union fan, and over the weekend, Philly captured their first trophy in franchise history with the Supporters Shield win. 6% chance to win the Supporters Shield, and that's exactly what they did. Inter Miami makes the MLS Cup playoffs in its first season. But shouts to my boy Josh for getting a trophy for his in this country favorite soccer team. So shouts to the Union for getting the job done like that. It's Masters Week, baby. I am pumped. I'm really excited for it. Just one more reminder before we get out of here. But and then of course Touchline Talk with the Josh Doring, as previously mentioned, that will be live tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Around the Bases with Chris Brown at 1 p.m. Eastern. Both of those at 110sportsmedia.com or twitch.tv/110sports. I'll be back on Wednesday. We'll talk the Masters. We'll do some Masters predictions. Really dive into that on Wednesday, and start getting prepared for the week ahead in college football and the NFL and all of that. We'll do all of it on Wednesday right here, twitch.tv/110sports at 11 a.m. Eastern. Until then, please take care of yourself. Stay safe. Hope you have a really solid first half of the week. And we'll meet back here, twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live at 11 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday.